The morning sun broke gently over Millersville, casting soft gold light on the quiet streets and familiar faces starting their day. Henry Jameson, 72, adjusted the worn army jacket around his thin frame and stepped outside, the cool spring air filling his lungs. His hands, calloused from years of hard work and military service, gripped a small leather satchel, his companion for what he called his last walk. He paused on the porch, looking back at the small farmhouse where his late wife Martha's favorite rose bush still bloomed. Before leaving, Henry left a note on the kitchen table, "Gone for a walk. Will return. Don't wait up." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a lifetime of quiet struggle. Neighbors watched him disappear down the dusty road toward the forest's edge, never guessing this was the day their world would change forever. The forest greeted Henry like an old friend, familiar paths winding between towering pines and whispering leaves. Each step carried memories of youth, of days spent roaming these woods with his childhood friends, and later, long walks with Martha. But today, the trees felt different, heavier somehow, like they were watching, waiting. His breath came slower now, chest tightening with the weight of years and a quiet loneliness that had crept in since Martha passed. Henry stopped at a mossy rock, sitting down to rest, staring at the dappled sunlight dancing through branches. His mind drifted back to simpler times, the laughter of his children, the sound of a football crowd cheering on Friday nights. Those sounds felt distant now, as if from another lifetime. A sudden sharp pain in his leg startled him. He tried to stand but faltered. The forest, once welcoming, now felt endless and unforgiving. Back in Millersville, worry was growing like a shadow across the town's heart. Days had passed since Henry's walk, and he hadn't returned. Neighbors gathered at Gladys Turner's porch, whispering prayers and theories. "You think he just got lost?" asked Joe, the postman, rubbing his beard nervously. "Henry knows those woods better than anyone," Gladys replied, eyes misty. "But he's not getting any younger." The local sheriff organized search parties, volunteers trudging through underbrush, calling Henry's name until their voices cracked. The air was thick with fear, hope tangled with dread. David, Henry's son, drove down from Chicago after the call, a knot tightening in his chest. At the town diner, the usual chatter quieted as news spread. Everyone remembered Henry's years of sacrifice, his service in Vietnam, coaching the high school team, standing for the veterans every Memorial Day. Now, the town's guardian seemed lost himself. In the quiet of a hospital room, David sat beside his father's empty chair, haunted by memories of their strained relationship. He hadn't seen Henry much in recent years, not since the divorce, not since life pulled them apart. "I didn't call enough," David whispered to himself, regret heavy in his voice. He remembered the last conversation with his dad years ago, cold and brief. "You're busy, Dad." "I get it," David had said, voice barely hiding his hurt. But now, as the search dragged on, that distance felt like a canyon. David wished for one more moment, one chance to say he loved his father. To tell him it wasn't too late. Outside, the town held vigil, clinging to hope that the man who gave so much would find his way home. 6 months had passed. The leaves turned fiery red and gold as autumn settled over Millersville. The search had long stopped, replaced by a quiet, aching acceptance. But then, on a chilly November afternoon, a young hunter named Tommy stumbled upon something. Deep in the forest, miles from any trail, Tommy spotted a frail figure slumped against a tree. The man was disoriented, ragged, and almost unrecognizable. Tommy's heart raced as he approached, calling out softly, "Hey, mister. You all right?" The man's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his gaze. "Where am I?" Tommy shook his head in disbelief. "You're in Cedar Ridge. Do you know your name?" A long pause. "Henry Jameson?" The man looked away, whispering, "I don't know." Henry's return stirred a mix of relief and heartbreak. At the hospital, doctors ran tests, but the diagnosis was grim: retrograde amnesia. Years of memories wiped clean, like chalk on a blackboard. David arrived, heart pounding, hands trembling as he looked at the man who was his father but now a stranger. "Dad, it's me, David," he said softly. Henry blinked, confusion clouding his eyes. "David?" The name was foreign, a puzzle missing pieces. Days turned into weeks. Henry lived in a fog, fragments of sounds and faces slipping just out of reach. He recognized kindness, the gentle tone of Carol, his daughter-in-law, but the past, the life, the family, the love, was gone. It was like meeting a ghost of himself, trapped in a body that remembered everything but its own story. The hospital room felt colder than usual. Henry sat staring out the window, the world outside moving in slow, blurred motions. David watched him quietly, the distance between father and son stretching wider with every silent minute. "Do you remember anything at all?" David asked gently. Henry shook his head, voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing except a name. Martha." David's throat tightened. Martha, his mother, the woman who had held their family together, was the one thread still faintly glowing in Henry's shattered mind. "She was your wife," David said softly. "She loved you very much." For the first time, a flicker of warmth crossed Henry's face, but it was fleeting, like a candle flickering in the wind. That night, David sat alone, wrestling with a painful truth. The man who raised him was lost, and the family he knew was slipping through his fingers. To help Henry reconnect, David and Carol brought in old photo albums, faded letters, and familiar keepsakes. They gathered around a worn wooden table in the living room of Henry's small Millersville house, hoping to stir memories long buried. "This was from your first coaching season," David said, pointing at a black and white photo of Henry holding a football, surrounded by smiling teenagers. Henry squinted, tracing the edges of the photo. "I remember the feeling," he murmured. "Pride, belonging." They played recordings of old songs Martha used to sing, hoping the melodies might reach him where words could not. One evening, as the soft tune of "Moon River" drifted through the room, Henry's eyes filled with tears. "She loved that song," he whispered. The house was quiet, filled with ghosts of laughter and pain. In those moments, David saw a glimpse of the man he once called Dad, not lost, but waiting, buried beneath years of silence. Millersville was the kind of town where everyone knew your name, your story, and your struggles. The diner still served pie just like it did in the 60s, and the church bell tolled every Sunday with a comforting rhythm. When word spread that Henry was found, the town rallied. Volunteers brought meals, neighbors stopped by with warm smiles, and old friends came to visit, sharing stories of football games, fishing trips, and long-gone dances at the community hall. Gladys Turner, now in her late 70s, took it upon herself to keep Henry company, knitting quietly by his side. "You've got to hold on, Henry," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "There's a whole town waiting to remind you who you are." Though Henry's mind was clouded, the warmth of Millersville seeped in like sunlight through rain, offering small sparks of hope in his dark days. David struggled with a whirlwind of emotions: guilt, anger, hope, and fear. The man he barely knew was his father, yet felt like a stranger. Every conversation was a minefield of frustration and heartbreak. One evening, David sat at the kitchen table, rubbing his tired eyes. Carol watched him quietly. "You can't do this alone," she said gently. "He needs you, but you need support too." David nodded, voice cracking. "I just don't know how to reach him, or how to forgive myself for leaving him alone all these years." Carol reached out, squeezing his hand. "It's never too late for second chances." Her words hung in the air, a fragile promise that healing might still be possible, even in the deepest cracks of their broken family. One chilly afternoon, Henry and David took a slow walk along the edge of Millersville's old football field. The empty stands and faded goalposts stirred something deep within Henry's heart. As they passed the bench where Henry used to coach, a sudden spark ignited. Henry stopped, fingers brushing the worn wood. His eyes welled with tears. "I remember this place," he whispered. "The kids, the games, the joy." David's voice trembled. "You gave so much here, Dad. You changed lives." For the first time since returning, Henry smiled, a fragile, honest smile. It was a small victory, but to David, it was as if the sun had broken through a lifetime of clouds. That night, as Henry lay in bed, memories began to surface, sharp, bittersweet fragments of a life once lived. He saw himself, young and strong, standing in a humid jungle in Vietnam, the sounds of distant gunfire echoing. He remembered the faces of brothers lost, the pain etched into every heartbeat. He thought of Martha waiting back home, the sacrifices she made, raising their children alone while he was gone. He saw his sons growing distance, his own stubborn pride putting walls between them. Tears slipped down Henry's weathered cheeks as he whispered to the darkness, "I didn't mean to leave you. I was trying to protect you all." The weight of a lifetime's sacrifice pressed down, but in the quiet, a resolve began to grow. Maybe it wasn't too late to heal. As autumn deepened, Millersville prepared for its annual Veterans Day ceremony. This year, the town wanted to honor Henry, not just for his service in Vietnam but for the journey he had endured. The community center buzzed with preparations, banners hung, chairs set, and old friends dusted off their uniforms. When the day arrived, Henry sat quietly near the front, a shawl draped over his shoulders. David stood at the podium, voice steady but emotional. This man gave everything for his country, his family, and his town. Today, we celebrate not just a veteran, but a man who reminds us all of the power of resilience and love. Applause filled the room, but more than that, Henry felt the warmth of belonging, something he thought lost forever. Tommy, the young hunter who found Henry, became a quiet hero in Millersville. His simple act of kindness sparked something unexpected, neighbors checking in on their elderly, sharing meals, and offering rides. One afternoon, Tommy sat with Henry on the porch, handing him a warm cup of tea. "You're lucky, Henry. Most people never get a second chance," Tommy said, eyes bright with sincerity. Henry nodded, voice soft. "Luck's only part of it. It's the kindness of others that pulls you back." The two sat in companionable silence, the sun dipping low. For Henry, the greatest lesson was clear. Even when life feels lost, the kindness of strangers and the bonds of community can light the way home. One evening, David found himself alone in the attic, sifting through dusty boxes filled with decades of forgotten memories, letters from Vietnam, photographs of a younger Henry and Martha, trophies from coaching seasons long past. His fingers trembled as he pulled out a faded letter, yellowed at the edges. "My dearest David, I'm sorry for the times I failed you. I was a man broken by war and loss, but my love for you never faded. Please find it in your heart to forgive me." Tears blurred David's vision. The letter was from Henry, written years ago but never sent. It was a painful reminder of wounds left open, but also a fragile bridge, a hope that healing was still possible. The days grew colder, winter's breath brushing Millersville with frost. Henry and David sat by the fireplace, the crackling flames casting warm light on their tired faces. Henry reached out, gripping David's hand with surprising strength. "Son," he said, voice rough but steady, "I may have lost my memories, but not the promise I made, to be here for you. For whatever time we have left." David's eyes filled with tears, a release of years of pain and regret. "We'll take it one day at a time, Dad. Together." In that quiet moment, two fractured souls began to mend, bound by love, forgiveness, and a promise of second chances. Spring arrived slowly, painting Millersville in soft pastels and new beginnings. One afternoon, David helped Henry dress in his old army jacket, now patched but still full of stories. Together, they returned to the forest edge, the place where Henry's last walk had begun years before. Henry breathed in the fresh air, the sense of pine and earth stirring a quiet peace within him. "It's not the same walk," he said softly, "but it feels like a journey back home." David smiled, holding his father's arm steady. "We're walking it together, Dad. This time, you won't be alone." The forest embraced them both, a living testament to resilience, healing, and the enduring power of family. Life in Millersville had a way of balancing itself out, like the gentle ebb and flow of the nearby river. Henry's story had stirred something deeper in the town, reminders of kindness rewarded and the quiet justice that comes from living a life with integrity. One afternoon, David received a letter from a Vietnam veterans charity, informing him that Henry had been nominated for a community service award for his decades of quiet sacrifice. Henry smiled, humbled. "I never did it for recognition," he said. "But maybe, just maybe, it's time to accept a little kindness back." The town's gratitude was a testament not only to Henry's service but to the ripple effect of goodness, sacrifice, and the healing power of grace. Spring turned to summer, and with it came a renewal, not just of the land, but of hearts. Henry's mind remained clouded, but his spirit grew stronger. Family gatherings became regular, laughter echoing around the kitchen table, stories shared with warmth and sometimes tears. One afternoon, Henry and David sat on the porch swing, the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. "I don't remember everything," Henry said quietly, "but I remember this, being with you." David smiled, squeezing his father's hand. "That's all that matters." In the end, it wasn't the memories that defined them but the moments they created together, a testament to love's enduring power, no matter the odds. Years from that first vanished step into the woods, Henry sat on his porch, the soft hum of Millersville life surrounding him. The forest was no longer a place of fear or loss, it was part of his story, a chapter of struggle and rediscovery. David joined him, handing over a cup of coffee, their fingers brushing in a quiet promise. "We found each other again," David said softly. Henry nodded, eyes filled with a deep, peaceful light. "Life gives second chances in the most unexpected ways," he murmured. "It's never too late to come home, to family, to kindness, to forgiveness." And as the sun dipped behind the hills, father and son sat side by side, bound not by memories alone, but by the love that outlasts even the darkest times.